Good evening, everybody, from the side of the Democratic National Convention in Atlanta. I'm Morris Jones, and the atmosphere here at the Omni Center is electric, as Michael Dukakis is only moments away from officially winning the presidential nomination. I'll be back in just a few moments, but first, from our studios in Washington, here's James Adams and Ron Gardner.
Now, America's #1 primetime newscast. This is Channel 5's 10 o'clock news.
Evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Michael Dukakis has a date with destiny this evening, the son of Greek immigrants ending a long odyssey, ready to formally win the Democratic presidential nomination. The roll call getting underway any minute now. Channel 5's Patrick McGrath here with us now with the very latest on what's going on.
James, the battle for the Democratic nomination was really decided 6 weeks ago when Dukakis' delegate total went over 50%. Dukakis goes into tonight's roll call with 700 delegates more than he needs for nomination. Jesse Jackson has about a third of the delegates, not enough, but still an impressive showing, and made all the more impressive because of his race. Jackson today called his nomination at this convention a stepping stone for progress for the future.
Jackson's success in the primary elections was due mainly to his unwavering support from blacks. In many contests, he got more than 95% of the black vote. But Jackson was proud of the fact that his support among white voters increased. And tonight, he chose white union leader William Winpensinger to place his name in nomination.
He has brought us together on the common ground of conscience, passion, equality, justice. He is the personification of feeling and reason united. And I am inordinately proud and uniquely privileged to offer in nomination for the office of President of the United States, Jesse Louis Jackson.
Q in the word qualified, for he is indeed qualified. Ladies and gentlemen, because of this one man, I second your nomination, and I second his nomination.
Michael Dukakis continued his courtship of the South by choosing Arkansas's progressive young governor, Bill Clinton, to place his name in nomination.
As someone who's worked with Mike Dukakis on hard issues in the National Governors Association, as someone who's hammered out compromises with him, who's disagreed with him, who's fought battles by his side, I can tell you one thing. When he needs to be, Mike Dukakis is tough as nails.
Sometimes the presidential nominee visits the convention hall on the night of his nomination. President Reagan has done that. But the tradition is for the nominee to wait until his acceptance speech on Thursday night. And indications are that Dukakis will follow tradition and wait. Now, however, it is possible we may see Jesse Jackson enter the hall sometime after Dukakis goes over the top, and Jackson may move that Dukakis be nominated by acclamation. And that will certainly be music to Michael Dukakis' ears. James?
Music in one sense, but a song that Dukakis has been hearing over and over. Jesse Jackson, Jesse Jackson, Jesse Jackson.
Well, that is true. Jackson would certainly get more limelight again tonight, but the reality we mustn't forget, tonight, Michael Dukakis is going to win the nomination. That is the reality, and I think people will not forget that either.
All right. Thank you very much, Patrick. Ron?
Well, while we wait for that magic moment that puts Michael Dukakis over the top, let's go back to Morris Jones now in Atlanta for a report on the process that will land Dukakis in the driver's seat.
Michael Dukakis is poised to win the Democratic presidential nomination tonight in a primetime roll call of delegates, energized by waves of ridicule directed at George Bush and the long-awaited endorsement from Jesse Jackson. Dukakis began the day with a commanding 2,763 delegates compared to 1,161 for Jackson. The Dukakis lead swelling by late tonight. Have you always been a Dukakis delegate?
Yes. I ran in the 3rd district, and I've always been and I won, and I'm a Dukakis delegate from the very beginning.
Have you felt any pressure at all? I'm sure you have to switch over to Jesse Jackson?
Well, yes, some, but the fact of the matter is I'm proud of Jesse as a black woman and all that he stands for and what he's doing. But in politics, I chose Dukakis, and I'm supporting him all the way.
The voting process tonight is being streamlined by the use of computers. Each delegation has one of these terminals.
There's 56 of these terminals throughout the hall. As each delegation wants to enter its vote total on a particular issue, the person designated comes over to the screen, presses it, it changes, it tells them a yes and a no. They push yes and the number of votes they want for that. They push no and the number of votes. If they try to go over their delegate vote count, the machine knows that. It's built into the software and it'll flash an error on there.
And tonight, while the feel-good atmosphere at the convention continues, there are others here offering a different outlook.
It's ironic to me that after 8 years of criticizing the actor President Ronald Reagan for engaging in a triumph of form over substance, the Democrats are playing if you can't beat him, join him.
At the Democratic National Convention, Morris Jones, Fox News, Atlanta.
This is supposed to be Michael Dukakis' night, but much of the day belonged to his wife, Kitty. Channel 5's Jack Connerty has more.
For Michael Dukakis, the surprise guest at a luncheon honoring his wife, Kitty, today, it is all beginning to seem real.
I don't know how many times out on the trail I'd be trying to get somebody to commit to me, and they'd say, well, you know, if Kitty were running, there'd be no question. I got to spend some time thinking about. I was down in North Carolina not too long ago, and somebody came up to me and said, you know, I'm going to be with you, North Carolina. I said, I'm delighted. How come? She said, your wife smokes. Well, I don't have to tell you what kind of a first lady she's going to be. A non-smoking first lady. That's what she's going to be.
Tonight, his name is entered in nomination. And with 2,763 committed delegates, his nomination seems assured. His rival and headline-grabbing fellow presidential contender Jesse Jackson and Dukakis met.
Basically, it was a get-acquainted meeting for the staffs and the key policy advisors, most of whom do not know each other, but now must work together, and that we're in the same boat with a common objective, that is to win in November. And of course, the areas across the country where we have worked together, some areas we won, some areas he won. We have some very effective organization in many of those places already, so it involves A, establishing relationships with the people involved, and B, working out an organizational and more structured relationship.
But back at the historic Fox Theater in Atlanta, Kitty Dukakis' father led the Atlanta Symphony in a rendition of the tune Dukakis now hopes he can lead in November. And tonight will end the happiest day for him so far. In Atlanta, Jack Connerty, Fox News.
Last night, Senator Ted Kennedy posed a question that's a shoo-in for a Democratic campaign slogan. Where was George? Tonight, Channel 5's Brian Wilson reports the vice president is making some unprecedented moves toward answering that question.
Usually, presidential aspirants kind of fade into the background during the rival party's convention, but George Bush ignored that tradition today, kicking off an 8-state campaign swing through the Midwest. Bush had been on a fishing trip in Wyoming with the man expected to become his campaign manager, Treasury Secretary James Baker. Bush claims they didn't talk a lot about politics.
We caught a lot of fish. We went to bed very early and got up early and had a minimal amount of discussion, literally, about politics.
But the Bush camp clearly had the troops out. These 4 prominent Republicans had been roaming through the streets of Atlanta trying to counter charges leveled by the Democrats during the convention.
We're concerned that we are looking at a Democrat strategy for 1988 that is really based on deception and misleading the voters in this country.
That the Democratic Party now is determined to be a party without principle, practicing the politics of deception.
Of course, it's all damage control, an attempt to keep the Democrats from completely dominating the news and limit the Democratic afterglow that is sure to show up in the polls. Brian Wilson, Channel 5 News.
In a few short minutes, we'll be returning to Atlanta, where the nominating process is getting underway. But while we're here right now, well, we can take actually a look at the floor demonstration going on now. And Patrick, earlier I understood that there was some concern on the part of some of the Jackson delegates from Michigan that they didn't get any super delegates and they threatened for a while a walkout. What do you think about that possibility now?
Well, we haven't heard much about that possibility. Everything we've heard so far is unity, 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 and in fact, you know, what we think is more likely to happen is that Jesse Jackson is going to indicate he wants Mr. Dukakis nominated by acclamation. So, and I think it's important not to overplay, you know, a relatively modest number of people walking out as a big political event. People get kind of excited and carried away at conventions, and I wouldn't put too much significance to it.
Now, as you just heard in the report from Brian Wilson talking about the Republicans in the GOP, they're already starting to call this the Dukakis-Benson-Jackson ticket. Is that a label that will stick?
Well, I think it's probably one that they will try. They were doing that, as you said, today. I think they've always thought all along they'd love to tag Dukakis with the Massachusetts liberal label, and if they can associate him with Jackson, it's easier to do. But since he's chosen Benson, that's diminished that a little bit. And I think in the future, quite frankly, you're not going to see as much of Jesse Jackson, certainly not as much as you've had so far. Dukakis realizes that Jackson can be an asset in some respects, but a liability in others. So I think Jackson cannot command the attention after tonight that he has been able to. I mean, he had something on
Again,
Dukakis.
we're looking at live pictures of the convention floor in Atlanta. Just saw a shot of Governor Bill Clinton from Arkansas. He pointed out in his speech that he had something very much in common with Governor Dukakis, the fact that he had, in fact, lost his governorship and ran again and won successful. I got the feeling during his speech that they attempted to paint Governor Dukakis as an ordinary guy, just an average Joe, by some of the anecdotes that the governor used in making that nomination speech.
Yeah, they certainly want to humanize him. Talked about him being a real Boston Celtic fan, and that if he's got a liability, it's that he's perceived as this technocratic manager and a little bit unfeeling. And his efficiency as a manager is well documented, and they're trying to humanize him as much as possible.
Any concern that Michael Dukakis, as you pointed out earlier, said he will not come to the convention floor, and negotiations are still underway at this hour as to whether or not Jesse Jackson will officially come at the back end of this convention. Any fear that Dukakis, while he has definitely managed and run this convention, that perception is not being displayed to the people?
I think tomorrow night you're going to see that indeed Dukakis has control, because I'd be very surprised if we did not see on the platform after all the acceptance speeches, Jesse Jackson right there, arm in arm with Michael Dukakis and Lloyd Benson. That's what we expect to see. Now, remember 1980, Jimmy Carter had to go hunting around the platform looking for Ted Kennedy, and it was an embarrassment, and all the network commentators pointed that out, and instead of being an asset, it ended on a kind of a sour note. I suppose Jackson could do that, but all indications are that Jackson wants to support this ticket 100%. Now, down the road, if Jesse Jackson feels that he's not being included enough, if his people are not being well treated, if he's not getting enough of a role, then we may hear some complaints from Jesse Jackson. But I would be very surprised to see Jesse Jackson create any problems between now and the end of the convention.
Well, let's go now to Atlanta and Channel 5's Morris Jones. He's in the midst of that sea of humanity there in Atlanta. Morris.
All right, thank you, James. While you and Patrick McGrath were talking, we just finished the nominating process of Michael Dukakis, a rally and band and music. Of course, you recognize former Virginia Governor Chuck Robb, who likes this political stuff and music, running for the Senate now. Dukakis has more than enough delegates needed. This is all kind of pro forma, although Jesse Jackson said he did not want this to be a coronation for Dukakis, but it's turned into that, hasn't it?
Well, I think it's clear once the final primaries were held what the outcome was going to be, but Jesse Jackson had a little different agenda. I think he's achieved that. I think that he brought the whole thing together last night. He extended an olive branch. He recognized that we had to recognize the inclusiveness of the Democratic Party, the breadth of the Democratic Party. I think tomorrow night we'll see Mike Dukakis reciprocate. I think that we're seeing probably the most unified convention we've had in many, many years, notwithstanding all of the concern that led up to it.
I've seen a couple of issues develop during the campaign. The rhetorical question, where was George, when Ted Kennedy and others are speaking? The other one, the Pentagon bribery scandal. That's becoming a campaign issue. Are you going to be able to ride on that through the November election, plus any other angles, because the economy's doing fine, everybody's happy at home, or that's what the Republicans would tell you?
My guess is the general election will focus more on what Michael Dukakis and Lloyd Benson can do for the country, what they can do to solve the serious questions. I happen to think that not yet fully explored is their ability to attack our deficit question credibly. Given that the tight-fistedness, the penny-pitching ways, he's almost as cheap as I am, of Michael Dukakis, and the experience of Lloyd Bentsen on the Finance Committee in the United States Senate, they have a dynamite combination to really do something about the most serious long-term economic problem facing the United States. My guess is their credibility in this area and their background in other areas that will be important, and some of the themes, some of the emotion of this convention will probably be more important to the final outcome and will dominate the latter stage of the campaign in ways that some of the things that you're hearing from the podium won't.
You are not so dependent on the coattails to get into the U.S. Senate as other lawmakers are around the country who are running for office. How critical is a Dukakis-Bentsen win for House and Senate this November?
Well, I think any close race is likely to be affected by what happens at the national level. Most of the races for the House and the Senate where you have incumbents seeking re-election probably won't be affected one way or another. But any of the close races could, and the ability of this team, if they get a chance to sit in the seat of government and provide leadership, is going to be affected by what happens in those various Senate and House races. The whole question in the Senate of whether or not they could conceivably reach the 60-vote margin, or from the Republicans' point of view, whether they could regain control of the Senate. Those are important pieces in the equation of being able to carry out whatever programs might be advocated.
Charles Robb, thanks for being with us tonight on the 10 o'clock news. That's it for the time being. James, Ron, back to you in Washington.
All right, we'll see you later on.
Thanks, Morris. Stay tuned now for Nancy Dickerson's commentary on tonight's convention events.
And the final countdown as delegates cast their votes.
Joining us now for some perspective and analysis, as she has been all week, is a veteran of Democratic and Republican conventions, Nancy Dickerson. Nancy joins James now on our interview set. James?
All right, thank you, Ron. Nancy, some Republican pundits are already saying, where's the Duke? Is this the night that Dukakis takes over the convention?
Well, certainly that's what Governor Dukakis and all the convention managers feel and hope and believe will happen. But you know, they're going to have to play catch-up ball because as I count it, this is a 4-day convention. And the first 2 days, Monday night, the summit of Jesse Jackson and Governor Dukakis. Last night, Jesse Jackson's very remarkable speech. And tonight, he also is being nominated, as is Dukakis. So that's 2.5 days for Jesse Jackson and 1.5 days for Dukakis, which he has to share with his running mate, Lloyd Bentsen.
Is there any precedent for such continued dominance by a runner-up?
No, none whatsoever. I covered a lot of conventions. One of them, I remember the 1960 convention when John F. Kennedy went out to Los Angeles to claim the Democratic nomination. And he was much like Dukakis. He had the nomination pretty well sewed up, all the delegates. We got out there, and there was a surprise. Adlai Stevenson showed up. And he went out to the convention hall. He was not expected, and he electrified the crowd. He was the darling of the Democratic liberals, and they went wild when he was out there in a spontaneous demonstration. Well, I'll tell you who else went wild. John F. Kennedy, sitting back in his hotel room watching all this on television. And he really never forgave Adlai Stevenson for that. He said it wasn't a proper thing to do. And besides that, it ruined the great Kennedy plan for an easy nomination. You know, James, I was thinking there was only time before in our history, candidates just didn't go to conventions. They stayed at home, and FDR broke that tradition. He said it was a silly, absurd tradition, and so he flew out to Chicago. But before that, the candidates would stay at home, and then a delegation would arrive 3 weeks later and say, you've got our nomination. So there's no precedent for this at all.
But the governor's in a pretty tough position. What alternatives does he have, really?
Well, he doesn't have any alternatives, but as the Republicans are saying, this is the first time in history you're going to have 3 men running on a 2-man ticket.
As you pointed out earlier, we are at the halfway point. What have the Democrats accomplished? Just where are they tonight?
Well, I think they sat back and analyzed this. They said, we've lost 4 out of the last 5 presidential elections. We don't want to do that anymore. And how are we going to change it? And they decided that their party had gone way too far to the left, and they were going to bring it back to the center. And to do that, they had an innocuous platform, and they chose as a running mate, a Southerner who is a conservative, a moderate. And they also have followed the Republican pattern of having a unified convention and having their major arguments off prime time. And so that, with that kind of a process, they're trying to regain the 18 or 22% of the Democrats who have been voting for Ronald Reagan.
But have they left that perception with the public?
No, James, I don't think so at all. I think that the perception you get if you've been watching television all along is, and this is a television convention, it's contrived for television. If you've been watching all along, you get the idea that this is a convention that has been dominated by a black man, Jesse Jackson, and his black and liberal followers. Now, there are only 962 black delegates there, but if you watch television, I don't know if this is the reality, but you get the perception that they're focusing in on more black delegates than whites. And I don't know how this is going to play, given the racial prejudice throughout America. I don't know if it's going to backfire, particularly since the Democratic pros are trying to create the image of a new Democratic Party that has moved to the center and away from the left.
And very quickly, what do you think the Republicans are saying about all this as they view the convention?
Oh, they're having a wonderful time with it. I talked with Frank Fahrenkopf, the chairman of the Republican National Committee today, and he said the Democrats have had a political plastic surgery. That is, they've changed the face, but the heart and soul are still those of a liberal. And then he gave me a very, well, I guess, graphic illustration. He said what the Democrats are trying to do by moving their party to the center is similar to giving Jimmy Durante a nose job. Doesn't look good, it doesn't smell good.
Okay, Fahrenkopf's words. Thank you very much, Nancy. We'll see you again tomorrow night. Ron?
All right, thank you, James. Well, the theme of unity has been stressed over and over at this convention, and this afternoon, two of the party's brightest stars got together to demonstrate that unity is more than just a theme. Senator Ted Kennedy, no stranger to presidential politics, and Jesse Jackson sat down to plan the coming fall campaign and what they and other big guns in the party can do to ensure a Democratic victory.
One of my concerns is that people like Senator Kennedy and people like Governor Cuomo, people who have great credibility amongst Democrats in their own right, who in fact are able to motivate people in great numbers, have a relationship with the campaign that will enhance the campaign so that all of us who want to work will be energized and will have maximum turnout in November.
The unprecedented harmony has some pundits observing that Democrats are beginning to behave more like Republicans as they put aside their usual discord to close the ranks behind their candidate.
And coming up, the rocky road to peace in the Persian Gulf.
And Democrats are moving toward nominating their candidate. We'll be right back. We have heard reports of a tornado touching down on the Franconia section of Fairfax County just a few hours ago. The sighting has not been confirmed by the National Weather Service, but witnesses say the storm caused heavy damage to several houses. No injuries reported. Parts of Fairfax County were hit hard by this afternoon's torrential rains.
The pilot of a small plane is dead tonight following a crash at Dulles Airport. Channel 5's Mike Ritz has the details.
Was burning debris. Airport authorities say the pilot was the only person on board. He died in the crash.
We saw an airplane, a prop airplane, doing something wrong. He was going up at a real steep angle, real steep, like this. And he went slower and slower and slower, and he lost all his airspeed, and then it nosed over real fast, and then it turned a little so we could see like the back and the wings, and went right down. And as soon as he hit, it was a big ball of flame.
The plane went down just after 4 p.m. Investigators say it was a twin-engine craft owned by the Fairways Corporation based at National Airport. Authorities say the plane had been in a hangar at Dulles and was just being moved back to headquarters at National.
What was going through your mind when you saw this thing happen?
Stupid feeling of helplessness because somebody was going to die and there wasn't anything you could do about it.
I saw it happen, and there's not really much you can do. It's just, you know, you just sort of hope that whoever is piloting is ready to meet his maker.
Authorities say the plane never got more than 1,000 feet high. They say its roll down the runway appeared normal.
Airport operations authorities say no distress calls were made to the Dulles Tower. National safety investigators are just now starting their probe into why the plane crashed. At Dulles Airport, Mike Ritz, Channel 5 News.
Airline representatives and anti-noise activists have been arguing back and forth all evening in Crystal City. This debate's about night flights at National Airport. Channel 5's John Hanrahan says the stakes are high.
Technically, National Airport is open 24 hours a day. But during overnight hours, only the so-called new generation, quieter commercial jetliners are supposed to use Washington's close-in airport. The current noise restrictions on aircraft at National begin at 10 at night and extend until 7 in the morning. But the Regional Council of Governments wants National closed to even quiet jets during those overnight hours and wants the airport restricted to only the quiet jets during evening hours. The airport manager's proposed compromise would change the noise limits in such a way as to effectively ban all commercial and many commuter flights during a shorter overnight period, while still permitting the quieter jets to come in between 10 and 11 at night and between 6 and 7 in the morning. Tonight, more than 250 people braved the thunderstorms to attend a hearing on changing the night rules. Residents of D.C., Maryland, and Virginia told the airport's authority in no uncertain terms they want a night curfew and not a short one.
By 8 o'clock in the evening, most people are home. They want to enjoy the quiet of their home or have friends over.
MWA's forced 7-hour sleeping program, everyone to bed at 11 and up at 6, 365 days a year, regardless of age, health, working hours, or personal habits, is unacceptably totalitarian.
Airline representatives told the authority it's not fair to change the nighttime rules.
And aircraft were required, costing well in excess of $40 million each, in the specific response to the rule.
The airport's authority will take written comments on the issue until August 5th, and in early September will likely decide whether overnight operations at National Airport will be reduced or eliminated entirely. John Hanrahan, Channel 5 News.
A United Nations team is on its way to the Persian Gulf tonight to work out details of a ceasefire between Iran and Iraq. Channel 5's Mary Norton explains why hopes are even higher tonight that Iran will go along with today's UN resolution for peace.
Iran's leader Ayatollah Khomeini said accepting the UN peace resolution was worse than drinking poison, but his country finally agreed to peace talks and a ceasefire. The UN resolution also expressed deep distress over the accidental downing of a civilian airliner by a U.S. ship in the Gulf early this month. The language did not condemn the United States the way Iran wanted, but its ambassador still accepted the measure.
We hope that other parties consent, especially the United States too, comply with the words and spirit of this resolution, so as to prevent recurrence of this tragic case, and so as to bring back safety of civil aviation, as well as freedom of navigation for commercial shipping in the Persian Gulf.
Fighting continues in the Gulf despite the ceasefire resolution. The negotiations to stop the shooting could take a while. Until then, United States planes and warships will remain in the Gulf, according to UN Ambassador Vernon Walters.
We intend to stick with our effective Gulf policy. As the Vice President stated in this chamber last Thursday, once tensions decrease and the threat to Western interests dissipates in the area, then the level of our naval presence will naturally be reduced. We reject any suggestion that the current Western naval presence in the Persian Gulf is somehow an intrusion. It is not. It is a force for peace.
The peace resolution was first adopted by the United Nations a year ago. Iraq agreed to it then. The Ayatollah Khomeini at the time vowed to keep fighting until, in his words, the last drop of blood was shed. Diplomatic observers say heavy Iranian casualties in the past year may be the reason for Iran's new interest in peace. Mary Norton, Channel 5 News.
Oliver North and 2 other defendants in the Iran-Contra conspiracy case want their trials postponed, or in North's case, dropped completely. Channel 5's Tom Hendricks says the reason for the move may be related to the upcoming presidential election.
Colonel North, former National Security Advisor John Poindexter, and businessman Albert Hakim are accused of conspiring to divert profits from the secret U.S. arms deal with Iran. Vice President Bush was in a position to know of the deal, but Bush is running for president. Any possible involvement in an Iran-Contra trial early this fall could hurt his election chances. Whether North is concerned about creating problems for Republicans or the timing of a presidential pardon was not discussed today in court, where District Judge Gerhard Gazelle took under advisement the delay request. In another legal maneuver, attorneys for North filed a request before the Court of Appeals to kill the pending trial outright, a move which the American Civil Liberties Union joined in a friend of the court brief. At a news conference, ACLU representatives said constitutional rights must be protected even of people who may subvert the Constitution.
It is clear that virtually all of the grand jury and trial witnesses against these defendants were exposed to immunized testimony.
In other words, the ACLU contends that the immunity granted by Congress last year means the defendants cannot be made to stand trial now.
The ACLU reads the Fifth Amendment to mean what it says, that no person can be compelled to testify against him or herself. The Supreme Court has held that the government can compel testimony from a person, but if it does so, the government cannot thereafter use that testimony against that person.
The response from the independent counsel's office was brief and discounted the arguments of the ACLU. So now it's up to the Court of Appeals to decide, with the trial of Oliver North still scheduled for this fall. Tom Hendrick, Channel 5 News at U.S. District Court.
The FBI tonight says it has busted a Libyan nationalist group's McLean, Virginia headquarters. Agents arresting 6 men believed to be involved in a plot to murder a high-level U.S. official. Government sources say the official may have been former National Security Advisor Oliver North. In a bail hearing this afternoon, U.S. Attorney Henry Hudson said that one man, the owner of a Northwest D.C. travel agency, was involved in a potential plot to assassinate key players in the 1986 bombing of Libya. The FBI says the travel agency was involved in an illegal diversion of funds to a group called the People's Committee for Libyan Students.
What we're dealing with here is an allegation of diversion of funds. Under the presidential orders that were imposed upon the Libyans some time ago, back in 1986, they were restricted from bringing money and property into this country. Subsequent to those presidential directives, they were granted a license by Treasury in order to fund student activities within this country.
All of those arrested today were charged with illegally using the funds to support the activities of Libya's Muammar Gaddafi. They are also being held without bond for reasons of national security.
A federal judge in Florida threw the book at convicted Colombian drug smuggler Carlos Later today, putting him away for good and then some. Later, said to be a key figure in the Medellin drug cartel, was fined $350,000 and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Then the judge added on another 135 years as a sign of determination, he said, to rid this society of this cancer.
Coming up, we'll go live to the roll call in Atlanta
as the Dukakis machine rolls toward victory. The Democrats in Atlanta are in the midst of their roll call vote tabulation for the Michael Dukakis presidential nomination at the moment. Let's go live now to Atlanta and see if we can get a sense of how it's going. The Louisiana delegation voting at this moment
has cast 41 votes for Michael Dukakis, 33 votes for Jesse Jackson, and 1 vote for Dick Gephardt.
The state of Maine, way over there.
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
Madam Chairman, the great state of Maine proudly cast 17 votes for its good friend and good neighbor from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, that great governor and the next president of the United States, Michael Dukakis.
Yeah.
And 12 votes for an inspirational leader in the Democratic Party, Jesse Jackson.
Maine has cast 12 votes for Jesse Jackson and 17 votes for Michael Dukakis.
The state of Maryland, 84 votes.
Madam Chairman! On behalf of the only state called America in the miniature, home of the national anthem, home of the national 59 votes for the next President of the United States, Michael Dukakis.
Maryland cast 25 votes for Jesse Jackson and 59 votes for Michael Dukakis.
Now, this next one, I'm going to really try and pronounce it.
Okay, we're back. William Donald Schaefer, the governor of Maryland there.
Did he forget to plug anything? The crab cakes?
But I thought he'd throw in a case of crabs at least. At any rate, some ups and downs with the weather.
What's ahead? Let's ask Sue Palka. She is in the Weather Center. Sue?
We see more thunderstorms on the horizon again, Ron and James. We're going to update you on what happened with that unconfirmed small tornado in Franconia, tell you everything we know at this hour. And also take a look at radar. We still have a few thunderstorms hanging around. Take a look at some of the rainfall totals as well as the high temperatures we reached today. About 3/4 of an inch of rain, at least a little more than that, about 8/10 at National. After a high today of 92 degrees, same reading at Dulles with almost 2 inches of rain. The pollen washed out, air quality in the moderate range. We'll look at some of the rainfall totals across the region in the 5-day forecast in just a minute. Well, at least the thunderstorms have helped to curb our temperatures. We're at 75 degrees with a few clouds around and a barometer rising. Take a quick look at Patuxent River radar. Still a few thunderstorms around. They're the areas that you see flashing, particularly over the western panhandle and also over across the panhandle of Maryland. Let me take you to the computer, and let me also say that most of those thunderstorms are going to continue in the area for the next several hours before they die out. We talked earlier in the show about a possible tornado in Franconia. It was a small one, but it may not have been a tornado. It could also have been what we call a downburst, which is a brief burst of winds up to 90 or 100 miles per hour out of a strong thunderstorm that affects a very small area. At any rate, it doesn't matter whether it's a tornado or a downburst because the amount of damage was still extensive within a very small area. About 1 block, 9 homes lost a lot of trees, and 3 had significant damage to them. So we'll have folks from the National Weather Service out there, I'm sure, tomorrow to let us know whether it was indeed a tornado or downburst, straight line damage. All of the trees were down on one side of the block, which is interesting. Pikesville, Maryland, 1.5 inches of rain. Darnestown, over 3 inches of rain. Some very beneficial thunderstorms when they weren't producing wind damage, which we also saw a lot of tonight. A couple of lightning strikes here in the D.C. area, too. A lot of clouds around tonight. And that is going to continue tomorrow because the frontal system is pretty much stalled, bringing a lot of beneficial rain across parts of Ohio and Indiana, up to 7.5 inches of rain in southern Indiana, Salem, near Latrobe, Pennsylvania, 4.5 inches of rain, and you can see the thunderstorms that still exist across parts of Maryland. The front is going to stay pretty much where you see it on tomorrow's forecast map with weak areas of low pressure riding along it. So look for another day tomorrow, very much like we had today, with temperatures right around the 90-degree mark. With one exception in this country, the broiling heat continues out west where temperatures in the interior valleys were about 116 degrees. So another hot one for us with more thunderstorms and hopefully put a dent in our drought, at least for the short term. Sunrise, sunset time for tomorrow, 5:59 and 8:29. The normal high about 88 and the normal low temperature about 70 degrees. Our forecast tonight, the showers and thunderstorms will gradually end, although it'll take a little longer in the panhandle of Maryland and West Virginia. 70 to 75 degrees. Tomorrow, another muggy, warm one with afternoon thunderstorms. And tomorrow night, we could see some of those lingering again before dying out in the cool of the night, 70 to 75. 5-day forecast shows more thunderstorm activity for Friday and Saturday and some somewhat less humid air, let me say, coming in for Sunday and Monday. Right now, the tail end of the weekend looks the best, but the heat is back on Monday.
Okay.
The heat hasn't gone anywhere, let me correct that.
But the rain is here, and that's good.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you, Susan.
All right, James.
All right, thank you. Steve Buckhant's up next with sports. What's happening, guy?
Dexter Manley in the headlines. Not necessarily the headlines you'd like to see. We hope it's not as serious as it may be. We might find out Friday exactly what's going on with Dexter. We'll update you on that situation and show you what happens when the worst-case scenario looks like it's realized out at training camp with Doug Williams. Stay tuned.
Knows how to get our attention, doesn't he, folks? That looked like a pretty hard hit.
It was
on
a hard
Williams
hit.
there.
He took it and he absorbed it, and I'll show you that in just a second. Meantime, the Dexter Manley situation is this. Dexter's being called in to talk with NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle later this week concerning, quote, something minor, unquote. The Washington Post is reporting the investigation stems from a recent substance abuse test in which Manley showed up positive, although it was for a minor substance. You remember last March, Dexter checked himself into a hospital with a bad drinking problem, and 2 days later he was at the clinic in Minnesota. He went through rehabilitation, worked hard to get back into playing shape, and had a good season. It appeared his problems were behind him. He did say today that he was confused by this latest scenario, but he wants to sit down with Pete Rozelle and let him see what kind of person Dexter Manley really is. Meantime, I spoke with Dexter's agent today, Bob Wolf, and he says this substance abuse thing is a complete surprise to him.
All I know what I read in the newspaper, and that's the first I even heard of anything, and that's the first I've even heard about any type of substance. The only time we've ever talked or had anything to do with the commissioner, but he was just trying to more or less monitor how he was doing as far as alcohol was concerned, because he went to Hazleton and he's been taking the aftercare program and doing everything right. But the National Football League is very protective of their reputation and what goes on there, and they just wanted to make sure everything was fine.
Bob, have you talked to Dexter recently, and what did he have to say to you?
Yes, I've spoken to him maybe several times in the last few hours, as a matter of fact, and he's terribly upset that something like this should be even happening. But we want to respond to the inquiry, and we want to go there and cooperate with them and be very forthright, and I'd be very optimistic that everything should be all right. I just want to make sure that we answer everything for them.
The meeting with Commissioner Rozelle is scheduled for later this week, although Redskin General Manager Bobby Bethers believes it will take place on Friday, with Dexter and the remainder of the vets reporting to Carlisle on Saturday. But like everybody else, the news was a shock to the guys at training camp, and at the very least puzzling.
Well, we don't have the information from the league, so it's in their hands, and we're going to have to wait till we get the information. I really don't know what the situation is.
Naturally, it's something that you hate ever to have happen, and a loss of a Dexter Manley could be, you know, that's a big loss to a football team. But like I said, we just have to wait and see.
As a player, it's something that we cannot control because, you know, it's a guy's own personal life, and we really don't know what goes on with a guy once he leaves the practice field and training. But Dexter's a big part of the football team, and I just hope whatever it is that things get cleared up.
There's a guy who's fielded about 8,000 questions in the last week, not concerning his ability, but his health. Well, Doug Williams may have answered some of those questions when he took this hit in a passing drill at practice. Now watch his left knee and watch and listen to the reaction of the players and coaches when he gets nailed. Does that make you take a deep breath or what? He got it right in the knee, and if it were not for that brace that he wears, we might be seeing Jay Schrader sooner than we anticipated. But you can see Doug popped right back up. He continued to practice, which has got to be a good sign. But take another look at it, and boy, he really absorbs this shot. Can you imagine where Joe Gibbs' heart was right about this point? But like I say, well, I mean, that is some scary stuff right there. But he took the shot and he absorbed it, so he's all right. Orioles and White Sox postponed by rain. Connors won at Sovereign Bank, but 10th-seeded Dan Goldie of McLean, Virginia, was upset. That's unfortunate.
Thanks, Steve. We'll be right back.
I wonder who made the brace.
Lennox.
Going back to Atlanta now on Channel 5's Morris Jones. Morris.
You've got to be a math expert here, James, but I've been adding up. Ohio is voting right now, but the most recent number of delegates just now with North Dakota voting, 1,468 delegates for Michael Dukakis, 720 for Jesse Jackson. The magic number needed to be nominated, 2,082. So as we're talking right now, Michael Dukakis is on his way to the coronation that Jesse Jackson promised would not happen, although it looks like it's getting that way. Ohio just now voting, and we're going to add up the total 1,604 now for Michael Dukakis. Let's go to some of the floor action here live in Atlanta.
A state committed to excellence, strong in its faith in America's future, a state that will be in the Democratic column this November. For the sake of allowing an important statement of Democratic unity later in this roll call, moving us toward victory in November, passes at this time.
What did you say? Did you say the
Oklahoma pass.
Apparently, when I called the state of Iowa, that vote was taken incorrectly, and I am very sorry. And before I continue with the roll call, I'm advised I should return and call the state of Iowa, and let's be sure we get the mic on and get the right vote recorded, because I'm doing this with the...
It's all pro forma anyway. Michael Dukakis will win the nomination, and that's the news. Thanks for being with us.